Hey everybody, and welcome to this, my third of 3 videos about the Canon EOS 3. We're stuck here on top of the camera because we are going to go into great, almost painful detail on how to set up this camera for use as you want to use it. We're going to talk about the custom functions. Custom functions are accessed through the custom functions button here. And what you do is you just press it down once, and the custom functions menu will pop up here on your LCD. Under the metering bar, now there are 20 custom functions 0 through 19. Under the metering bar, there is a block for custom functions that have been set differently than the default. So what we're going to do to rotate through them is we use the command wheel on top, and we're going to then press the custom functions button to adjust the specific settings within each custom function. So we'll start here at F0. Custom function 0 is match the focusing screen. So 0 is for focusing screens ECN or ECR, and 1 is for all other focusing screens. If you have the focusing screen this came with, set it to 0. Custom function 1 is film rewind mode. There are 4 options, 0, 1, 2, and 3. 0 is high-speed automatic, which is fast rewind as soon as the roll ends. 1 is high-speed not automatic. It's fast, but you have to push the rewind button on the back. 2 is silent auto. It happens automatically, but it's quiet. And 3 is silent, no auto. It's silent, and you have to push the film rewind button on the back. So I'm going to set this to 3. Which is what it was on before. The difference in silent and fast is speed and noise. So if you're say photographing a golf tournament, then you would want to use silent. Or if you're trying to photograph birds and don't want to spook them, you'd want to use silent. It's slower, but it's much quieter. Custom function 2 is film leader position. Basically what this does is after the film is rewound, option number 0 rewinds the leader all the way into the cartridge, okay, as if there were no leader. Option 1 leaves a leader like this. And what that means is, let's say you're halfway through shooting a roll and you're not going to finish it for the day. Set this to option 1, leave yourself a little bit of a leader, and you can then write which frame you were on, so when you pick that roll back up in a few days, you don't accidentally shoot over whatever frames you'd already taken. Leaving a leader can also make it a little bit easier to pull the film out of your camera, and once it's out, then you just shove the leader all the way back in. So those are the 2 reasons to have a leader versus not having a leader. Custom function number 3 is your ISO setting. 0 is using the DX code with the ability to manually override it, as we saw in video 2. And option number 1 is manual setting only, meaning option 1 turns off the DX code reader. So, matter of personal preference, honestly, it's not a huge reason to turn it to 1, because if you are using film without a DX code, or you want to push and pull, even with the DX code reader on, you can just adjust it. I think with 1, it remembers your previous setting. So let's say you had 20 rolls of 400 ISO film and you were going to push all of them to 1600. Rather than adjusting the ISO each time you put a new one in, you could set that to 1, set the ISO once, and then every single time you put a new one in, it's going to default to 1600 until you change that setting. So that would be one use of it. Custom function 4 is autofocus activation. Your options here are 0, 1, 2, and 3. In 0, autofocus and auto exposure are both activated when the shutter is half pressed, and auto exposure lock occurs when you press the asterisk button. With option number 1, your auto exposure and autofocus occur with the asterisk, and then auto exposure is locked when you have to press the shutter button. With option number 2, what happens is your autofocus and auto exposure occur with the shutter being half depressed autofocus lock happens with the asterisk button. And option 3 is autofocus and auto exposure occur with the asterisk, and there is no autofocus lock at all. I happen to like 2, but largely a matter of personal preference on this, which one you're going to use and what your shooting style is. Custom function 5 has 4 options again, 0, 1, 2, and 3, and this is shutter speed and aperture setting in manual mode only. So I have it set to 2. Option 0 is that the command dial is for shutter speed. The rear dial is for exposure value compensation plus and the command dial. Okay, option 0, shutter speed is controlled through the command dial. The rear dial or the exposure value compensation and the command dial will adjust aperture. So if you've shot a lot of entry-level or mid-level Canon cameras, typically in aperture priority mode, you adjust the aperture by pushing down on the EV compensation button, or the plus-minus button right here actually is what it is, and then dialing the command dial, and that adjusts the aperture. So this option 0, if you set it, function 5 option 0 allows that or command or the rear wheel. Option 1 is the reverse of that, where this is aperture and the command wheel or exposure value and the command dial adjust shutter. Option 2, which is what I use, is the same as 0, but the aperture can be set with no lens attached. So basically, with options 0 and 1, if you have no lens, you can't adjust the aperture. Option 3 is the same as 1, but can be done with no lens. So options 2 and 3 are designed to make life easier for professional photographers, basically, especially if you're switching lenses, but you want to have the aperture be the same. So let's say that you have the 51.8 on here and you're going to be shooting it at f8. Great, now you got to change it and put on the 300 f5.6, but you still want that to be f8. With option 2, if you set it to f8, it will remember that between lens changes. Function 6 is exposure setting increments. 0 is 1/3 stop. 1 is a full stop for shutter speed and aperture and 1/3 stop for flash. And 2 is half stops for everything. If you're going to be shooting slides, you want to have it at option 0 for 1/3. Other than that, black and white and color film are so forgiving that it just comes down to how quickly you want to scroll through settings. If you're shooting a lot of flash work, especially in studio settings, using option 1 to control your aperture and shutter speed and full stops, and then your flash in smaller increments can give you really good results too. Custom function 7 has 3 options, 0, 1, and 2. With option 0, some autofocus lenses can be focused electronically manually after autofocus is complete. Now, the manual is linked in the description. Page 113 contains a lot more information on that. I have exactly none of those lenses, I don't think. Maybe this one, I don't think so. I don't know. Honestly, I don't shoot enough Canon to know if I have one of those lenses. This is my Canon lens, so. Back on track. With that, page 113 in the manual will give you detail on what those lenses are. With option 1, electronic manual focusing cannot be performed after autofocus. And with option 2, electronic manual focusing is always off, period. With option 1, the idea is you can electronically manually focus before autofocus is complete. And that's really good for things like macro work, where let's say you're focused at infinity, you know you're going to have to get really close for your next shot. So rather than autofocusing the whole way, you just manually focus up to it, close to it, and then let the autofocus do the fine tuning at the end. So function 8 is going to be frame counter display. 0 is counts up, 1 is counts down. Personal preference on this, which one you want to use. Function 9 is auto exposure bracketing sequence and cancellation. There are 4 choices, 0, 1, 2, and 3. With 0, your 3-shot sequence for auto bracketing is proper exposure, under, over, automatically cancels after the sequence is done. With 1, proper, under, over, and then it continues in that pattern until you manually cancel it. And that's what we were seeing in video 2 by pushing these 2 buttons, by the way. With option 2, which is what I use, it is under, at value, over, and then automatically canceling. And for me, it's just easier looking at a roll of negatives to see under, proper, over. But whether you use proper, under, over, or under, proper, over, just a matter of what you want to see on your negatives. And then option 3 is the same. It's under, proper, over, without automatic canceling. It will just continue repeating that process until you finish your film. Custom function 10 is focusing point flashing mode. And there are again 4 options, 0, 1, 2, and 3. 0 is your autofocus point flashes with focus and illuminates dimly with the shutter being half pressed. Option 1 is the AF points do not flash. 2 is the AF points are dim after focusing. And 3 is bright autofocus illumination. And other than that, the functions are like 0. Completely a matter of personal preference, which one of these you would like to see and how you want to have your autofocus points light up. Custom function 11, focus point selection method, 0, 1, 2, and 3. 0 is focus point button turn right here with the main dial and command wheel. So in the second video when I showed you how to use this, it worked that way because I had option 0. If you were to select option 1, it would be the same, but it would use the exposure value button instead of the AF button, AF point selection button. With option 2, the command wheel alone will always select AF points. And option 3 is the same as 0, but you push the FEL button down instead of the AF point button. Matter of personal preference, really, and what you are used to shooting. I tend to find the AF point selection button to be the easiest to remember because you're assigning that function to the button which it's designed to have. Custom function 12 is mirror lockup. 0 is no mirror lockup, and 1 is always mirror lockup. To use mirror lockup, you need to set the function to 1 and then set it to 0 when you're done. So if you want to use mirror lockup shooting for star trails, waterfalls, microscopy, things like that, you come in here, set the function to 1, use your mirror lockup. After that shot, you go back and then set it to 0. Otherwise, you will use mirror lockup on every shot. And what mirror lockup does is you push the shutter button once, locks up the mirror, push it again, and it takes the photo. The advantage to that is if you want to be really good about having good shake-free images, lock up the mirror, set the self-timer countdown, set it to activate, walk away. Your mirror is locked up. There's not going to be any mirror slap shake in your images. Your self-timer counts down. Any shake in the camera and tripod from pushing the shutter button has worked its way out, and then you have the ultimate and stable photos. So that's why mirror lockup in this way is an interesting and good way to do it for the most accurate images you can take. But you only want to use MLU when you're going to be doing mirror lockup shooting. Function 13 is focus point and spot metering linkage. Now, we touched on this a little bit in the second video where I said that with this option, if you use spot metering over here, which is box with dot, then with this function you can set it so that your autofocus point is linked to your spot meter reading. 0 is no linkage, meaning that spot metering is always at the very center of the frame, regardless of how you're focused or what your image composition is. 1 links the spot metering to the active autofocus point, Any autofocus point can be used, but spot metering is linked to one of the central 11. So with 1, what this means is there are 11 autofocus points in the center out of all 45. Only those 11 can provide spot metering. All 45 can provide focus. So if your autofocus is over here, it will spot meter off of the nearest autofocus point to where focus is achieved. Number 2, no linkage. Spot metering is always at the center of the frame, and the AF points are limited to the central 11. So that's good if you're going to be using spot metering. You always want to have your spot metering be in the center, but you only want to centrally compose so it turns off everything but the central 11 autofocus points. Function 14, automatic reduction of fill-in flash output. 0 is enable, 1 is disable. Basically, with disable, what you're doing is preventing the subject from being underexposed in backlit situations when you're using fill flash. Function 15, shutter curtain sync, first or second. Now, if you remember back to the second video where we talked about flash, and I said the first curtain goes, and when it completes its travel, the flash is triggered, and then the second curtain goes. This allows you to change that. So with option 0, the flash triggers when the first curtain completes its travel. With option 1, the flash triggers immediately before the second curtain starts its travel. If you're using 1/200th of a second for your flash sync speed, it does not matter. If you're using 15 seconds, or really any of the slow shutter speeds, it does matter. 1/4 second, 30 seconds, bulb, whatever it is. Then it makes a difference. Okay, so let's say that you have a scene here. You've got your buddy riding a skateboard or a scooter or a bike up here, okay? And you're going to be taking a picture from right here. And it's nighttime, and you have your flash set up here. What you're going to do is you're going to have a bunch of lights on your buddy's bike or scooter or whatever, and he's going to ride into the frame here. And then when he gets to this point, and before he starts, you're going to hit bulb, or a very long shutter speed. Bulb is easiest to do this with. Open up the shutter with bulb. He's going to ride into the frame, and the lights on his bike are going to be recorded because the shutter is open. Then you're going to release the shutter release button. The second curtain is about to trigger, so the flash will trigger, illuminating your buddy here, and then the exposure will end. You'll have an illuminated friend with a trail of lights coming out from behind him. So that's one of the things that second curtain is very useful for. Generally speaking, you want to have first curtain set up because it's the best of it's the best option for most flash use. Function 16 is safety shift, disabled or enabled. 0 is disabled. Basically, with enabled, the camera can override your settings even in manual mode. I forget if it's manual mode or not. If somebody knows this, they will post that in the comments. But this will happen in aperture priority and shutter priority. And what this does is the camera, if you have it set to f1.8 and your shutter speed is blinking 1/8,000th of a second because there's too much light, and you're going to get an overexposed image. I'm sorry, there's not enough light rather, and you're going to get an underexposed image. If you have this enabled, your camera will automatically change your settings to give you a proper exposure, overriding what you chose to use. Matter of personal preference, if you have it disabled, you will learn what mistakes you've made. If you have it enabled and you make mistakes, you won't know. Function 17 is manual focusing point selection range. 0 is central autofocus point only. 1 is central 7, and 2 is central 13. So basically, what this means is that if you're going to manually select your autofocus points, this limits which ones you can select. As you can see, I have it set to 2 because if I'm going to manually select it, I want to have a little bit of flexibility there. Function 19. Function 18 is unused and applies only to the EOS 1V and was skipped in the 3 to keep the numbering convention in the 3 the same as in the 1V. So basically all of these functions are also applicable to the 1V, but there's no function 18 in this camera. Function 19 is stop button function on the L series IS super telephoto lenses. This only applies to those lenses. 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 0 is the stop button ends autofocus drive. 1 is the stop button activates the autofocus drive. 2, stop button activates AEL, auto exposure lock. 3, the stop button activates focus point changing. And 4, the stop button activates autofocus mode selection changes. If you don't have one of those lenses, it does not matter what you set this on. If you're not using one of those lenses, it does not matter what you set this on. That setting is specific to those lenses. And that is it. Whew. That is it for the Canon EOS 3's menu system. If you have one of these and you have now gone through it and customized it, there you go. It is set up to be an ideal shooting machine for your specific preferences. And I hope that my explanations of what each of those items does was helpful in you picking out what settings you want to use. Thank you for watching this video. Please give me a thumbs up. That lets me know that I'm on the right track producing content which is useful and helpful to you. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those in the comments section below. I'm pretty good about checking these every couple of days and answering questions. If you have any suggestions or ideas for future videos, and if I have the technical know-how and equipment, I'm more than happy to make those. One last thing. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. I gotta get up, Steinbeck. I have to turn off the camera.